Yeah, welcome everyone to our another session on Flow Matrices in Scrum with Kanban by Zeeshan Amjad. It is requested to all of you, please mute yourself during the sessions. And if you have any questions, either you can write it in the chat or whenever Zeeshan has a chance to ask a question or ask for any comments. Yeah, so let's get started then. Over to you, Zeeshan.
Thank you, Khurram. First of all, thanks to invite me to participate in this session. This is always a learning experience by sharing and by learning with others. And today's topic is flow matrix in Scrum with Kanban. And this topic is more suitable for anyone who wants to appear in PSK certification. That's a professional Scrum with Kanban, but in general, even if you don't want to appear in that certification, that is really helpful for anyone who wants to introduce Kanban in a Scrum or Scrum in a Kanban environment. And today we are explicitly focusing on one area that is a metrics and how we are going to do the metrics today. So let's start. This is my contact information in case if you want to contact me after the presentation, if you want to join me on the LinkedIn, if you have any question which were not addressed during the presentation, and you can send me an email. I will try my best to answer those questions. And if I don't know the answer, then I will try to follow up with the appropriate person and expert and try to learn from myself also. And we'll try to explore what will be the best answer for this thing. Basically, there is a prerequisite for this session. I assume that all the audience have a basic understanding of Scrum, and I assume they have a basic understanding of Kanban. I'm not expecting they're expert of these two things, but because we have to set the ground, that's why this is necessary that you should have some understanding. And because this session is a time box, we have to finish it within an hour. So I cannot discuss all the details, all the prereq. Otherwise, we'll ended up discussing these two topics, and the main topic, will not have enough time to discuss about that thing. So this is my assumption with all of the attendees. And in case if you don't have this basic understanding, just let me know. We will try to answer your question. If possible, if there is a simple enough question we can discuss, we can squeeze in during the session, we can do it. If there is a long answer and there is a time-consuming answer for this thing, then probably we'll follow up those things. And one more thing is because I am running it in a fully screen, so I cannot see if you type the question. So please, Khurram, you can help me out. You can see the question in a text window, chat window. So feel free to stop me if you think that there is an important question we need to address, because I cannot see it right now.
Absolutely. I will be here to help in that regard. No worries about that.
Thanks a lot. Let's start with the first thing. What is the matrix? So this is a standard definition of the matrix. It means we are trying to measure something and we are trying to get some result after the measuring something. And the second question arises immediately after this: why do we need the metrics? So we need the metrics for two reasons. First thing is we want to make process predictable. If we cannot measure it, we cannot make it predictable. And if we cannot make it predictable, we cannot predict it, then we cannot improve it. And there is one very famous proverb I came across in one of the reading: if you cannot measure, you cannot improve. So this is one very important reason to measure the things, to need the metrics. So on the same line, if we are looking from Scrum with a Kanban, then Scrum.org actually introduced 4 key flow matrices. So I'm sorry, 4 key flow matrices: work in progress matrix, cycle time matrix, work item age, and throughput. Anyone who has worked in Kanban environment in past might be familiar with three of these metrics. Work item age is probably the new metrics for most of them. It was actually a new metrics for me also. So these are the 4 recommended metrics introduced in Scrum with Kanban. So now let's take a look at these 4 matrices one by one. Let's take a look at work in progress. There is a very important principle in a Kanban that they have to provide a limit on work in progress. And they are providing the limit in work in progress to improve the flow, to improve the cycle time. We'll discuss the cycle time in a little bit more detail, to improve the throughput. And one important thing is work in progress and work in progress limit both are not the same thing. First of all, calculating the work in progress is very easy. You just have to see in your Kanban board that how many items are there, who has started but not finished, and that's it. It is not any computation involved in this thing. Work in progress limit is actually the maximum number of items allowed in one particular phase or in one particular column in a Kanban board. Both are not the same thing. Work in progress items mean how many items are currently in work in progress state. Usually the work in progress items are less than work in progress limit. There are some exceptional cases. For example, if there is some urgent item came, then usually we are not changing the work in progress limit. We just move it into the different swim lane and it can go above the work in progress limit. But we prefer that there are not more than 1 items are in that swim lane. So there should be only 1 item in that case. So most of the time, work in progress should be less than work in progress limit. We can put the work in progress limit in many ways, but it is not recommended to put it in like a individual persons. So it is not a good idea to create a swim lane based on the individual developers. Usually we are doing it in a different phase. Like if you are making a very simple Kanban board, so it is like not started, work in progress, done, but there can be more than 3 columns, more than 3 different phases. If we reduce the work in progress, then in journal, it increases the efficiency. So I'm saying in journal or on average, but that is not always the case. There is a possibility that removing the work in progress limit might not increase the efficiency. And if you want to see in a little bit more detail, we can have more discussion on this thing. There is a topic of Little's law that came from the queuing theory, and that exactly discuss this relationship, how the reducing work in progress in journal or on average increase the efficiency, but there is a possibility usually if you put work in progress limit for all of the columns, then instead of increasing the efficiency, you are actually decreasing the efficiency. So if we increase the efficiency, then it means that on average, we are having the better workflow. And this is very important metrics in sprint retrospective. Actually, almost all of the metrics are very important in sprint retrospective. And we are explicitly going to discuss how these matrices are fit into the Scrum events and which metric is more useful in one particular sprint event. So we are going to discuss this thing along the line in a few minutes. Let's first go through these metrics first. Second thing is cycle time. Cycle time is a lagging indicator. What does it mean by the lagging indicator? It means that we'll know the cycle time after the things happen. So we are not predicting the cycle time. Cycle time is when the item starts till the item stop. So if one particular product backlog item starts last week and it finished today, how many days are passed? So that is a cycle time. Or in other words, I can say how long one particular item is in work in progress state. And we can get some interesting things from the cycle time. First thing is we'll get an idea how soon we get the customer feedback. If we have a long cycle time, it means that we are not completing the items very quickly. It means we are not releasing it very quickly, and we are not getting the customer feedback very often. So it reduces the customer interaction. Increasing the cycle time actually reduces the customer interaction. We are going to discuss one more concept after we went through these 4 key flow matrices. That's a service level expectation. But just to give you one heads up that there is a strong relationship between the cycle time and service level expectation, SLE. We can use the cycle time to calculate the service level expectation. Now there is a question: if our project just started and we don't have any historical data, then how can we calculate the SLE? So in that case, if there is no cycle time data available, then it is just a guess, or best guess, or it's just estimated based on our previous examples. There is also a discussion that if you don't want to use these basic things for the guess, then you can use the advanced techniques like the Monte Carlo simulation, but we are not going to discuss all those Monte Carlo discussion here. This is comparatively new metrics. This is what I was discussing in the beginning. Anyone who has worked on a Kanban, Lean Kanban University, KMP, they might not familiar with this particular thing. This matrix is actually telling how much time elapsed when this particular item started. So it is actually telling that this particular item is in work in progress state for such a long period. It means that it is only suitable, only calculated for those items who are in progress. Because if the item is not in progress, item is completed, then it is actually a cycle time. So we calculated work item age for only work in progress items. It is very important to discuss in a daily Scrum for a couple of reasons. First thing is there might be few items who are in work in progress for long period. So we have to discuss in our daily Scrum. We should discuss in our daily Scrum that what is the reason why this particular item is in work in progress status for such a long time. Is there any blockage? Do we have to remove something? Do we have any dependency on something? It is also important in the sprint planning that if some item is not able to complete during the sprint, it is in work in progress status for the whole time, and the work item age is so high, it means that we started that item at the beginning and until the end of the sprint, we are not able to complete it. So we have to discuss this thing in a sprint planning, that what might be the reason we are not able to complete it. We can also discuss in a retrospective that why we started with this particular item, if there is any dependency on some other things, why we are not able to finish this thing. If the work item age is very low and we ended up the sprint, then it gives us the indication that that particular item is not in the work in progress state for a long time, but we didn't have enough time. We used our available resources and times to finish the other works, and we were not able to finish this thing. So maybe there is nothing wrong for this particular item. Maybe some other items are having some problem. So this particular matrix is important to see get the information about those items who are in progress state, and especially if those items are not able to finish at the end of the sprint. This is one of the reasons you cannot find it in a pure Kanban literature, because in pure Kanban literature, there is no concept of a sprint. They're just doing the continuous flow. But here we are discussing Scrum with a Kanban. Last important key flow metrics we are going to discuss the throughput. Throughput means that we want to know how many number of items we are able to complete per unit of time. It gives us an indication that how fast a team can complete one particular item. So team can forecast something, like they have some confidence that one particular item should be able to complete very quickly or not. And those who have a experience of a Scrum, they can correlate this throughput with the velocity. So it is something similar to velocity, but there is one very important difference. When we are calculating the velocity in Scrum, we are calculating the velocity in terms of story points. And story points actually reflect that what is the size of that particular item, what is the complexity of that particular item. One item may be relatively more or less complex than the other item. But when we are calculating the throughput, we are not considering the velocity. So all items, regardless of their size, whether they are small items or the big items, we are considering all the items in the same way. So this is one important difference between the velocity and throughput. If we reduce the average cycle time, then it means that we are potentially increasing the throughput. So if the item starts and finishes very quickly, then it means we are actually completing more number of items per unit time on average. And this is very important in the sprint planning meeting. During the sprint planning, based on this metrics, we can take a workload that this is our throughput. So we can, based on this metrics, we can decide how many items we can take in the next sprint. Before moving to the next concept, if there is any question, Param, can you please coordinate?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any question in the chat. I even asked if they have. Yeah, but do we have any questions from the participants? So there's one question from Junaid. He would like to know why we have not lead time as a metric here.
Thank you, Junaid. So lead time is actually the concept that one particular item is in a backlog till finish, and cycle time is one particular item is start to finish. I'm going to discuss these two when we are going to discuss one of the visualization tool, CFT. You can definitely use lead time or any other metrics. These four metrics we are discussing here is especially the four metrics which is proposed by Scrum with Kanban. There is an official guide, Scrum with Kanban. But that guide is not restricted you to use any other metrics. You are feel free to use any other metrics. One important thing to keep in the mind is actually one of my instructor told me that you should not use too many metrics. Otherwise, you might not focus on the areas to improve, because that's what the purpose of the matrix is. You want to improve. And you should know carefully what you are trying to measure and what you are trying to improve. One more tip that instructor gave to us is, if one thing you are measuring, you know that it is improved up to your criteria, whatever you want to achieve, then pick another area you need to pay attention, start another matrix, gather data for another thing, try to improve that thing, and then move on. So in a long run, you can keep changing the metrics based on what you want to improve. Here, our discussion is very much focused on those 4 key flow metrics, which is actually suggested with Scrum with Kanban. But yes, you are free to use other matrices.
Okay, I'm not sure if Zeeshan, you already answered the question from Iqbal. Okay, Iqbal is asking, in Scrum with Kanban, are we supposed to use only these 4 matrices, or can we use any other as well?
I will just repeat the questions, things that you are free to use other matrices. Yes, you can. But be careful what you want to measure and do not use too many matrices, because I actually saw the tendency that people are so much involved in the numbers and graphs and the others quantitative things that they actually forget about the basic intention, that they want to improve the process, they want to improve the product, that is the outcome of that process. They don't want to improve just the matrices and numbers. Okay, so let's go to second concept, service level expectation. The definition, the official definition of service level expectation is, it's a forecast how long it should take a given item to flow from start to finish within your workflow. It has 2 parts: the period of elapsed days and probability associated with that period. For example, I can give an example, like our SLE is 85% or 90%, whatever the probability you calculated, 90% of the items are completed within like 10 days. This is different than SLA. SLA is service level agreement. So here in SLA, you are giving a surety that this particular thing is addressed in this time frame. SLE is expectation, not the actual contract or agreement. And anyone who came from the stats background, they know the expectations. Whenever we are discussing about the expectation, we are discussing in terms of probability. And here we are discussing, and we can provide the different SLEs, like 60% of the items will be done in 5 days, 75% of the items will be done in 8 days, 90% of the items will be done in 12 days. So that's why it has two parts: the probability and the period of elapsed days. That particular thing is supposed to be done. At the beginning, we discussed the relationship between the cycle time and SLE. And there is a natural relationship. We have a cycle time, like how many items are finished in X number of days, and we can actually draw the chart and visualization, which we will see in a few minutes, based on that data. And based on the cycle time, for example, if we have a historical data like in past 2 months, we completed 10 items in 3 days, 15 items in 5 days, 25 items in 8 days, 10 items in 15 days, and 1 item in 30 days, something like that. Then based on that data, we can predict or we can calculate how much, what is our SLE, what is the probability that one particular item will be completed in that many number of days. Obviously, if there is no historical data available, then we cannot calculate it. Then we have to guess it, we have to estimate it. One very important point to discuss is SLE cannot give you information or guarantee about any particular product backlog item. We cannot get the information like this particular product backlog item will be finished by this particular date. It is just an expectation, probability for all product backlog items in general. If someone comes to you based on the SLE and asks you that based on your SLE, this particular product backlog item should be finished by this date, and we'll see that this particular item is in work in progress for that many days, and their work item age is that many days, then how soon it will be finished? You cannot provide that information. SLE is just a guess, you can say a forecast things that this is just an expectation, but it is not providing any such a guarantee. That's why the probability is involved in this thing. And this is also very important metrics in our daily Scrum, because in our daily Scrum, along with the work item age, we'll see that if one particular item is in work in progress, for example, in past 10 days, and our SLE is 12 days, so we can see that it is very close to violation of our SLE. And we'll see, we have an opportunity to see if there is something we can do for this particular item. If we can achieve that SLE, we can finish it in time, or if we cannot do anything, this is such a big item that it cannot be finished. If there is some external dependency or some other factors. But along with the work item age, we can discuss this SLE in a daily Scrum also. Now we are going to discuss the flow matrix and its relationship with the sprint events. We briefly discussed these things in previous slides. Now we are going to make it a little bit more explicit. So as we discussed earlier, work in progress is very useful in a daily Scrum. We want to see that why one particular item is in work in progress state for such a long period, and is there anything we can do to fix this thing? Not fix. Is there anything we can do to unblock this thing if there is any blockage? And the same thing we can discuss in a retrospective also. Cycle time, because cycle time, we calculate the cycle time for the item that is completed. And we'll use the cycle time for forecast the SLE, calculate the SLE. So it means cycle time is useful in sprint review as well as in sprint retrospective. Actually, almost all of the metrics are very important in a sprint retrospective, because in retrospective is actually we want to improve the things, and that's what the purpose of these matrices are. So these matrices are giving us some information about the process. Same as for the throughput, as we discussed that it is the closest one to the velocity in Scrum. We are just giving the same weightage to the bigger item and small item. So they are not unlike the sprint Scrum where the bigger item has a higher story point and a shorter item has a smaller item has a lower story point. So we'll use this matrix for the sprint planning and sprint retrospective. Work item age, as we discussed. If items are, obviously we are going to discuss in daily Scrum why this particular item is in WIP for such a long time. And if it is not completed, then it is very useful if you're going to discuss in a sprint planning and a sprint review. Here is one chart that explains the relationship between the flow matrix and the sprint events. So that will give a very good understanding where one particular flow matrix is useful in which particular sprint events. Is there any question related to the things we discussed so far?
No, we don't have any questions so far. However, I see that your screen sharing has stopped.
What slide you will see?
We don't see any slides right now. I think the screen sharing has stopped from your side.
Okay, let me take a look at again. Can you see it now?
Yes, it's back to normal. Thank you.
So I'm sorry, guys, if you are not able to see this screen in a few minutes ago, then this table shows the clear relationship between the flow matrix and the sprint event. So you can see that how the things are related and which matrix is useful in which particular Scrum event. Next topic, we are going to discuss the visualization. Before going to the visualization, if there is any question related to this one.
Yes, Iqbal says that if we use Scrum with Kanban, do we have to change any Scrum events?
No, actually, you don't have to. You can use all of the Scrum events as it is. Kanban is actually not enforcing to you to change any sprint event at all. It is very much like you are using Scrum the way you are, and it is like an additional add-on, and you will get additional benefit when you are using the Scrum with Kanban. In fact, I want to give one more example of this one. Almost all of us who use the Scrum in our environment, most of the people are using the Jira, and they created a Jira board. There is no such a concept of that board or that visualization in the context of Scrum. And that board is very much similar to what we are using in a Kanban without a WIP limit. I can say that board is a Kanban board without a WIP limit. So we are already incorporating in our daily practice at least the visualization part of the Kanban. And it is not changing our day-to-day practice of Scrum. And if we just started introducing the WIP limit and other Kanban concept, it only improve our flow. These are complement to each other, not a competitor to each other. Any other question, or should we move forward?
We don't have any other questions, so we can move forward.
Thank you. With 4 matrices, now we have a 4 visualization. This is not recommended by the guides, but these are the most commonly used matrix visualization techniques. And there can be a whole presentation on these visualization. Here, I will try to be a brief and just give an introduction. Maybe in a follow-up session or any other discussion, we can discuss these visualization techniques and other visualization techniques in a little bit more detail. Here, I just want to give you an idea. Actually, the first one, CFD, anyone who came from the Kanban things already familiar with this thing, and anyone who used the Jira, they probably already saw this CFD. Let's start with the CFD. So this is one example of the CFD. It can be a lot of different ways. And here we have only three bands, like done part, started part, and queue part, or three phases or three columns. If you're discussing with the Kanban board, obviously it can be more than that. And here you can see there's a lead time metrics also in one of the, I'm sorry, I forgot the name. I think Junaid asked the question. So here you can see that with this visualization, we can get a lot of information. And here you can see the difference between the lead time and the cycle time. Lead time is when the item entered in the backlog till it finish. So you will see the arrow started with the backlog. And cycle time is when the item is started, when someone started working on that particular item till it finish. And these are because these are time dependent things, calculating the time. So that's why it is calculating in a horizontal axis. So you will see the horizontal lines, lead time and cycle time. The other side, work in progress, will calculating how many items are in work in progress, how many items are in a backlog, how many items are done. This information is the snapshot, like this particular time, how many items is in WIP, how many items is in backlog, how many items are done. So that's why these are the vertical lines. So you will get very important information. This one important information, you can also get it from here. It might be a little bit advanced for someone who might not have that much mathematical or graphical intuition. If you see the slope of this curve in any particular time, the slope of the curve is actually, you can get the information about the throughput. Let me try to explain it a little bit more. The slope is actually, we are calculating across the time, across the x-axis, like the difference between 2 points on x and difference between 2 points on y. Like this particular time, these many items are done. Mathematically, the formula is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So difference in y, here the y is number of work item over difference of x. Here the x is a time. So it means how many items are done on this particular time. So it is actually a throughput. So with the curve of this graph, you can also calculate the throughput. So this is very comprehensive visualization technique, and we can get a lot of information out of this. The others are comparatively very simple. Cycle time is scattered plot. Here we will see that how many items are done in this time frame, and we can find a lot of interesting information. Like we can find the outliers. You can actually see the outliers, that this particular item is taking 120 days. So there must be something wrong. We have to fix it. We can find the clustered of information, like most of the times items are done in this thing. And one very important thing is, if we find the percentile, you can actually see the numbers 50%, 70%, 90%. These are actually the percentile. If you find the 95th percentile, so it means 95% of the items are done by this thing, and it is actually a horizontal line. you can see that 98% is a horizontal line, and this is actually a SLE, which we discussed earlier. Like 95% of the items uh, are done within this particular day. 98% of the items are done within this day. So even with this visualization technique, we can guess what is going to be our SLE. And that's what I was discussing earlier, that we can provide the different SLEs, like 50% of the item is done by 5 days, 75% of the items done by 9 days, and so on. Throughput run chart, it is very much similar to the Scrum velocity. So here we'll see that in this particular unit of time, how many items we have completed. And obviously there's going to be some ups and downs, but over the time, in journal, it will be smoothed out, because in journal, we'll have an idea how much.
We have a question here, Zeeshan.
Sure.
Yeah, so the question is, Junaid, is cycle time scatter plot also called control chart?
I am not aware of this term. I will follow up this thing. Maybe yes, maybe not. To be very honest, I didn't hear this term, the control chart, with respect to the cycle time. I heard this term with other visualization metrics, but in my knowledge, I didn't hear this term with a cycle time scattered plot. If there is any such a thing, I will take a look at this thing and follow up. Any other question?
No, we can continue.
Thank you. So this is very much like a velocity chart, just a line chart. I actually provided the reference at the bottom, so you can see it where I actually got this information. Last one is quite interesting, and this is actually a new metric. So this is pretty much like a heat chart, heat tree. So this will give you information about what is the age of some particular item. So if some item is in work in progress for a long time, then gradually it becomes green to red, and we'll have some visualization information very quickly that will have so many items in work in progress versus as item in progress. So these are the 4 items we discuss. Now it's time for questions, in case if I missed any question, and if you have any other question pop up in your mind.
Thank you, Zeeshan. So if you guys want to, you can unmute yourself and ask question yourself as well. Do we have any more questions for Zeeshan? Looks like, Zeeshan, you have already answered the question that we had from the audience. And if you have any other questions, you can always check it in our WhatsApp group as well, on Slack as well, wherever it's possible. Zeeshan is already there to help you answer your questions as well. Good. So there is one more thought from Junaid. Can you give half a minute's overview how you recommend to run it? I'm not sure what you mean, Junaid. Could you unmute yourself and say something about it?
Hello. Yes, I can. Well, thank you for giving me this chance to answer to ask the question. I just want to know that how to run the Scrum Ban. If Zeeshan can give us 1 or 2 minute overview on it.
Thank you, Junaid. So first of all, let me give a little bit introduction to the Scrum Ban for those who are not familiar with this word. So Scrum Ban is a word introduced, I think, in 2009, 2010 timeframe, it's actually Scrum with a Kanban. And that's exactly what we are discussing here without using the word Scrum Ban. In my experience, what I saw is if you are trying to use the Agile in any organization, I actually involve in transformation in 3 different organizations, 2 organizations successfully, 1 organization not successfully. So I have an experience of both failure and success. So once you try to start with the things, then people usually resist the change. And if we started with the Scrum, which is definitely a really good thing, there is a lot of benefit and people are using it for a long time, then it means they have to change their day-to-day practices. They have to introduce the new roles. One of the very first resistance came from the people is they're saying that there are too many meetings. And the reason of this complaint is because they are using the meetings for the other purpose rather than what the intention is. And what my experience is, in that particular scenario, we start with the Kanban. There is a minimum change involved in their current process. And gradually, once they are comfortable with this thing, then we can introduce the Scrum. Because in Kanban, we can just introduce, like what I did, we just introduce the visualization first. By just introducing the visualization, we can find out the bottlenecks. Okay, this particular phase is a bottleneck for rest of them. Then we introduce the work in progress limit. And introducing the work in progress limit in such a way that we also try to change the mindset from pushing the items to pulling the items. So it is like if I am a developer and I have a WIP limit on development, like WIP limit is 3 or 5 or whatever the number is, and we are already at capacity, it doesn't mean that we just sit idle and just wait something is done so we can pull something else. It means now we should jump on to the other people and try to help the other peoples. So it started the collaboration. It started to change the mindset in that way that now we are not like, there is nothing in my plate, so what can I do? I just have to wait, or there is too much item, and once we have to finish this thing, then we are doing something else. Because in past, I saw this thing happen, like developers are doing extensive development and a lot of items are in work in progress and nothing is done. And tester is just waiting. If something is done, then he can start testing the things. So once we are comfortable with this thing, then we can introduce the Scrum events or ceremonies or whatever name you want to give it to. In this way, it is more successful. If the people are already comfortable with this Scrum, still we can use it in such a way that just by visualizing the workflow, we'll find out the bottlenecks. This particular phase is a problematic. Maybe it's just a security review, it's a code review, or whatever way you define your process, whatever phase is, whatever the columns you introduce. And once you find out the bottleneck, then you will try to improve this thing. I'm sure some of you already have an experience, even in Scrum, that when the Scrum started, everyone just jumped on one particular product backlog item and started working on this thing. I actually saw it in one of the Scrum team. There are 7 people in a team, and they started working on 7 product backlog item. And no one knows what the other people is doing. And for them, the daily Scrum meeting is just a useless because no one pay attention and no one cares what the other people is doing. And here the things started like there are too many meetings because they actually lost the content and lost the intention, actual intention of the meeting. They are not using the meeting for what the purpose is. The daily Scrum is for the alignment. That is not for the status update. And the people started using the anti-pattern in such a way that They're saying, okay, my task, I'm doing the same task which I was doing for past 3 days. Yesterday it was 10% done. Now it is 40% done. Now we are back to the mini waterfall. So we can, in our current existing Scrum environment, we can still take a benefit of that thing. Did I answer your question to that? Hello, Khurram?
Yes.
Yes, thank you for the detailed answer. You did. Thank you.
Good. So thank you very much, Junaid, asking these questions. Absolutely help us to have a conversation as well. Do we have any more questions from the participants? Okay, if not, that's totally fine. I have shared 2 links, a link to our WhatsApp group and a link to our Slack group. If you have more questions to ask to Zeeshan afterwards, feel free to write a message there, and we are happy to answer them. And once again, Zeeshan, thank you very much for taking the time out to prepare this session and share your knowledge here. And I hope it was really helpful for our participants as well. So once again, thank you very much, and bye from our side.
Thank you, Khurram, for giving me an opportunity